past 11. So without further ado, I am going to open this live lounge for us. So thank you all so much for choosing us to sit in and listen to this live lounge today. So as most of you have already found your way to the chat, please use that chat function in the session today. And that is the way that kind of you can let us know your opinions, your thoughts, and then we're going to have a little bit of time at the end of the session with Rachel and Leah today to ask our questions. So use the chat to get your questions in for Leah and Rachel as we go through, and I'll be posing them to them as we go on. So my name is Sarah Edwards and I work in the Government Property Agency in the Workplace Experience team. And today with me, we have got two fantastic guest speakers who are going to talk us through a workplace experience framework and give us some tips for if we want to start replicating this or refresh some of the strategies and policies that we've got in our own organisations. This is going to be the inspiration and motivation to do that. Now, I'm going to preempt some of your questions, you eager beavers, and say that we can share the slide deck with you. We can do that post session. So we have a record of all you guys who have logged into the session today. If you want the slide deck, then we will send it out afterwards. So hopefully that cuts down a couple of questions on the chat from those of you who want to know whether you can get hold of the slide deck or not. So let me introduce our guest speakers today. We have Rachel, who is the Head of Customer Experience in the Government Property Agency, a mandatory hello wave. That's how we like to start. And then we have Leah, who is Head of Smarter Working and Customer Insight in GPA. Beautiful, thank you. And today our session, like I said, it's going to talk through what a workplace experience framework looks like and hopefully give us some inspiration and motivation to take some of this learning back to our own organisations and workplaces as well. So we're here for 45 minutes-ish. I'm going to ask a couple of opener questions to Rachel and Leah about the framework, and then we're going to save a good 10 minutes for your guys' questions. So like I said, fill up the chat with what you want to know from Rachel and Leah, and I will pose that to them towards the end of the session. So Rachel, I'd like to start with you then, if I may. Can you tell us about why you developed the customer experience framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So the framework was created in response to the challenge of bringing multiple organisations together into a single workplace. So in this case, a government hub. We needed something that we would ensure that the people and customer related activities were delivered. So I guess it started with asking about why are we doing this? Who is this for? Who does this really impact, and what really matters to them? And, you know, drawing from experience, workplace projects tend to be quite construction, design, FM led. And the experience of those who are actually going to be using the building, the people, hasn't always been the primary consideration until much later in the project lifecycle. But, you know, as we all know, it's people that are the lifeblood of any building. They're the ones that bring it to life, you know, forge that sense of connection to the workplace. And it was also about change and how change is managed. And moving into a government hub is, you know, it can be a huge change for some departments and for individuals as well. So it's not just around how the physical space looks and feels. It can be a different culture, it's different technology, and for many, it's a really different way of working in a smarter working designed environment. So we needed to think about how we could support departments through that transition and preparation for occupation, but also making sure that the individuals that use our buildings are comfortable, confident in using the spaces, the technology, and the services, but also have that sense of community and connection to their workplace. So off the back of that, we developed the Workplace Experience Framework. There's quite a wordy official definition for it. It's that it sets out the change management and customer-facing activities that are needed to support the delivery of workplace transformation. But actually, in essence, what it really means is that it ensures there's a dedicated work stream that focuses on people, our customers, and it's right at the start of the project, all the way through into handover and into business as usual. So it identifies the touch points with other key work streams such as design, FM, technology, and those dependencies that might actually impact the customer experience. But it also really helps to support the conversation with projects, with suppliers, and with departments about the customer experience and the potential scale of change that departments and individuals might be facing.
Brilliant, Rachel, thank you. And just before I ask you my follow-on question, just want to give a shout out in the chat. Laura's asked, you really want to get involved, and I feel your pain and frustration because you can't see the screen. Laura, if you want to try refreshing your browser, that might kick it into touch. If not, try logging off and then coming back onto the platform. The old adage of have you tried turning it off and on again might actually work in this case. So Laura, quick refresh. If not, quickly come out and then quickly join us back in, and hopefully we'll be able to catch you up. So Rachel, sorry that was a bit off topic, but we all know what these tech issues are like, so it's so relatable, isn't it? So the framework sounds so interesting, and it feels like it could cover so much. I mean, can you give us an overview of the stages of what are involved in that framework?
Yeah, certainly. Leah, do you mind? Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So there are 7 stages to the framework. They loosely align with the REBA stages. They fit with our governance gateways and also the customer-facing elements of government soft landings. So we found that by aligning to REBA and government soft landings, it means that our technical and project colleagues can relate it to their project stages, but it's also that we can then ensure that we're starting and delivering activities and products at the right time so they add value. So the intention behind the framework is that it will deliver that golden thread of customer service excellence from setting the expectation and standards right at the start of the project through to using customer insight, evaluation and action to drive continuous improvement. And whilst the framework is presented as linear, it's actually meant to be quite flexible. It's very much a collaborative approach, and we do adapt it to reflect the needs and the requirements of different departments, different projects and different buildings. But it's a really great tool to start that conversation about change, about people and about customer experience. So starting at the beginning, the first element is around educating and creating excitement. So that's about the different aspects of a smarter working environment, the new workplace, and how it can actually support the business vision of the organisation. So this part of the framework actually ideally starts before the project begins. This is the groundwork that sets the sort of outlines the vision, sets the expectation. Although one thing we have learned is that although we've got it at the start of the framework, it actually doesn't stop. It's like a continuous drumbeat throughout the project lifecycle. We also find as well that it's really key that we find the right people to help deliver this as early as we can. So we're looking for those workplace advocates, those people that are the super connected really between technology, estates, people, business change, and who can really help to drive this in their own organisation. So moving on, the next couple of stages are discovery, challenge and gather and baseline. These are really about data gathering, developing that really clear understanding of business and current ways of working. These stages are about kind of understanding how big the change is. So what's the gap between where we are now and where do we want to be? And it's also about, where necessary, having some of those challenging conversations about preconceived ideas about what's needed and having those evidence, sort of data-driven conversations and decision-making, really. And it's at this point we would normally undertake a preoccupation sort of workplace experience survey using, for example, Leesman. The idea being really that investing time, energy and resources at this stage, these early stages, actually can reduce the risk of delivering a workplace that doesn't support the business or delivers a poor workplace experience, or actually could potentially help prevent costly design changes in the later stages of the project too. So this leads us on to stage 3, plan and prepare. So this bit is around planning for the occupation and preparation for that transition into a smarter working environment. So it's thinking ahead about the really practical aspects of both business and culture change, really. So what needs to be done, who is going to do it, when does it need to be done by? And our experience is that you can really never start this too early. Stage 4 is maintaining support and guidance. So this is keeping that momentum and that support for those people that are actually delivering the change. So we share lessons learned, good practice, provide guidance products and access to communities of practice. So, people who can share their own experience and learning. And at this stage, the change management activities tend to sit with the organisations that we're supporting, but we're here to help guide, advise, and just keep that momentum going as needed, really. So the next stage is around community and connection to place. And, you know, we know that community and connection is really important for many, many people. So we put a lot of energy into this. And it's not just about those in the building, it's also about those who work remotely and have to connect digitally to their workplace. We found that when we do this, bringing people together from across multiple organisations into one workplace, actually encouraging them to shape the community and the etiquettes and the behaviours that they want, helps to break down those barriers. You know, and it opens up opportunities for sharing events, wellbeing activities, and learning as well. But it's also a really great opportunity to bring people together before the building opens, so they can actually really start to build those relationships. So within the framework, our role is around facilitating the building of that community and to nurture it, because it doesn't just happen organically. It needs a bit of support. And we help to provide the spaces and then those services that help to support it once we step away. So the next stage is informal induct, and this bit is really, really intense, and it's actually probably the most exciting stage. I'm not sure my team would agree, but I do. And this is the stage where it really, really starts to come to life as we embark on actually bringing customers into the workplace. So activities are very much focused around building familiarisation, induction, making sure that customer-facing information and processes and services are all stood up and they're ready for use. So the ambition being that when people come to the building, they feel comfortable and confident in their new workplace. They know where to find information. They know what to do if they need help. They know how to use the best work settings to suit their activities. So, and at this point, we also measure the customer soft landing experience so that we can start to identify lessons learned, get that initial feedback so we can start to address any emerging issues as soon as possible, really. So finally, last stage is around assess and improve. And this is really about post-occupancy care. It's about evaluation and improvement. So after putting in all of this effort, we don't just step away. Once handover takes place, we like to put in a light touch post-occupancy care approach. So we can provide support to the on-site team if they've got any customer impacting issues. We can work to help cement the community. But oh my God, the sun's come out. Sarah. Yeah, so we can help with cementing the community and do what we call behaviour snagging. So helping to embed those agreed behaviours and etiquettes. This final stage is also when we start to do post-occupation evaluation. So this is undertaking a post-occupancy workplace experience survey or a qualitative review to help support government soft landings. It feeds into how we can improve our services and standards, but most importantly, to make sure that we've actually delivered what we set out to deliver, which is a great place to work. So, yeah, that's a really high-level overview of the framework. I think just reflecting back, what's really key to the framework is data and insight. That is absolutely the bedrock. That helps us to have those conversations with all our different stakeholders. Understanding those experiences and the needs of individuals and organisations helps us to make sure that we provide the right support on the change journey. And every time we've applied this framework, we've learned something new and ways that we can improve it. So it is just evolving continuously. So, that's our approach. And whilst it was born out of the need to support the delivery of government hubs, the principles and the activities and even some of the projects can certainly be adapted to support any kind of workplace change, really.
Yes, spot on, Rachel. And I'm sure those of you who are in our audience and want to kind of deep dive into one or more of those steps, get some questions in for Rachel. I mean, especially on if we want our value for money out of Rachel in today's session, maybe some of those that, do we want to know about some of those examples where it hasn't gone quite as smoothly and some of those learning pieces that actually helps us evolve it. So I won't steal Rachel's thunder any more than that, but, let's get under some of those issues in the questions from you guys. guys. So don't forget to put your questions in on the chat, and we'll put those to Rachel and Leah at the end of the session. So thank you so much for covering that experience framework for us, Rachel. It's really fascinating. And Leah, I'd love to bring you in at this point, because Rachel's nugget that she left us on was how important data and insight is. So obviously insight and collecting data is baked into the framework that Rachel's just talked us through. So how do you use customer insights and data, and what is that actually telling us about the experiences people are having in these workspaces?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Rachel. Brilliant overview. I find it, even though we're working in it, I find it so interesting to just recap on it and just seeing that, how everything fits together. So in terms of our data we collect, as Rachel's talked through in the framework, we collect pre-occupancy data as stage 1 right at the start, and we've got the post-occupancy data. So that's what I'm going to chat you through first of all. So pre-occupancy data, when do we do it? As soon as we know those people who are going to be moving into that hub or into those new spaces, we want to get our hands on them straight away. As soon as we can survey those people, we can get out to them, we can get the most value from the data. So we're keen, like Rachel was saying right at the start, we want to know those people as soon as possible and get out there and get surveying them. And the reason we do that is because we can get more benefit from the data, we can get more value from gathering the data. So we've really been iterating and improving and increasing the ways that we use the data. So I'm going to chat you through some of the ways. So pre-occupancy data, one of the key things we use it for is design spaces. So as part of the survey that we use, we understand the activities people complete in their role, whether those activities are more individual, whether they're more collaborative, because understanding that really shapes the spaces that they need in the building. So that's one of the first ways that we use it. Also, it helps us to understand what we need in the building, understanding what services people want in the building, what do they want in terms of communal spaces and how important are they, and that helps design the building. And we also understand occupancy requirements. How often are people likely to attend the building? Why are they likely to want to be there? What's their magnet? What's the purposeful presence? Why are they going to be there? And that helps shape the entire building then. Business change as well. Rachel touched on how smarter working mature are these teams that are moving in. Are they empowered? Are they trusted? Are they moving around and using the spaces in the right way? Or are they going to need a lot of business change support? Because that's where Rachel's team, along that framework, they need to know how big is that ask from the team? How much support are they going to need? So that's a key area. And then benefits baseline. So we know that when we have these projects, we have these programs, there's a huge capital investment. How can we make sure that it is worth that investment? We know that people up at the top are going to want to know that. You know, they've signed off these multi-million-pound projects. Is it worth the investment? And benefits realization can be quite hard to measure, but if we can get the workplace experience baseline, we've got that in place then to do that. So that's our pre-occupancy data. We're using it, like I said, we keep iterating, we keep expanding how we're using it. And these are some key areas that we're using it so far.
You need to change that space design one to a B, Leah, because all the other ones start with a B. So that's like my OCD is let's have a B word in there.
Well, let's have a think about that then, Sarah. Yeah. And then we've got the post-occupancy. So Rachel talked about that at the end of the framework, that assessing and improving. So this is our post-occupancy stage. So we tend to do this around 6 to 9 months after full occupation. We want to make sure that people have had a really good chance to bed in, to use those spaces, and then understand what their workplace experience is. So we use that data then to feed into lessons learned, what's gone well, because we want to keep doing that in our new spaces and keep repeating that. What isn't working so well, and we want to tweak, refine, improve. Let's find ways to make it better for people, because it's all about creating great experiences. Post-occupancy evaluation, it can inform that. So as part of the post-occupancy evaluation for government soft landings, we need to understand the customer experience in those spaces. Post-occupancy evaluation covers a lot more, but understanding customer experience is one of those key parts of that. And then the benefits realization. Hopefully we're going to see that there is a marked improvement in terms of those workplace experiences that we can use then to feed in. So some of the things that we're finding, I wanted to give you an example where we've done a pre and post occupancy survey on our hub in Birmingham at 23 Stevenson Street. So we gathered some pre-occupancy data from 4 buildings that people were moving out of. And then in December, we did a post-occupancy for Stevenson Street. So this is how all about that benefits realisation that we've been touching on. So with this one, I won't go through everything because there's an awful lot of data on there, but as Sarah said, we can share the slides afterwards. But we've been using Leesman, who are a world leader in measuring workplace experience. And they give, when we survey a building, they'll give an overall workplace experience score out of 100. So previously, the score we had for those 4 buildings came out as 60.6. For Stevenson Street, we've seen a huge increase of 15.4 points up to a score of 76 out of 100. This means that the building is classed as Leesman Plus, which is the best of the best. So we are delivering an outstanding workplace experience in Stevenson Street. Just to blow our own trumpet, we are only the second ever public sector building to ever achieve Leesman Plus globally.
Wow.
The only public sector building to achieve that in 2022. And we received our Leesman Plus trophy earlier this week, which we will be displaying at Stevenson Street. So there's some key things that we saw that huge improvement then. So things like pride has gone up by 57% when comparing the pride and how people felt in their buildings before to how they feel in Stevenson Street. Pride we see as a real key indicator about how engaged people are with their spaces, you know, with their organisation and how they feel about where they're working. Productivity, whether people feel the spaces support them to be productive, has risen by over 20%. So again, we can see those benefits being realised by creating the right spaces. Sense of community as well. Rachel was talking earlier in the framework about all that work we do to invest in that community, and people feeling there's a sense of community has risen by 20% as well. So we can really see the reaping the rewards of that investment and that nurturing the community that Rachel was talking about. So there's lots of other indicators there. I will pick up on the right-hand side of the screen as well. We've got what Leesman call super drivers. They're all the ones who like Twister, don't they? If anyone remembers Twister, that game where you've got to put your left hand on one coloured dot and your right hand on the other. So what we've got here is if it's a red dot, it's below the Leesman average. If it's a green dot, it's above the Leesman average. If it's a blue dot, it's in Leesman Plus, which is the best of the best. It's beating even the best of the best. So what we can see, that first row of dots there was the pre-occupancy. So there's lots of red, there's some green in there as well. We did have one that was Leesman Plus, which was for individual focused work, desk-based. But what we can see now, these super drivers, these items are having the biggest impact on workplace experience. We can see in Stevenson Street, that last row of dots, we are above Leesman Plus on every single one of those super drivers. So that's brilliant news for us. Fantastic, lots of lessons to learn, lots of things to repeat. Still some tweaks we can make as well and improvements we can make. So we'll be looking at those, but some fantastic results. So other things we're seeing, Sarah, because I know you love seeing this data and knowing what's going on.
Yes, I do.
So when we've looked at all the civil service data we've gathered, so we've got data from over 40,000 civil servants across the surveys that we have launched. So we've got a huge data set. And what we've looked at here, when we start to understand whether people are more individual or collaborative, so when people select the tasks that they complete to fulfill their roles, we can see then whether people are more individual or more collaborative. Across the civil service, we can see that those collaborative people are around 38%. So there's more collaborative people than balanced or individual. So that helps us understand what sorts of spaces are we going to need. This is where I was talking about making sure we get that data early, because even when we surveyed certain departments, we've surveyed one department and their individual activities were making up 50% of people. So that's why it's so important to get in there, to survey people, understand how they work, because we can have a civil service average, but there can be variations along that. And obviously those people where they've got 50% individual, they're going to need a different setup of spaces to if you had 50% collaborative or higher on the collaborative side. So across the civil service, we've got nearly 40% of people collaborative. And then when we look at the top 10 most important activities to civil servants, 6 of them should be completed in, or would ideally be completed in a collaboration zone, only 2 in a team home zone, 1 in a meeting zone, 1 in do not disturb. So it helps us see the kind of like there is a bit more of a weighting towards that collaborative side and activities to be completed in a collaboration zone. And I think kind of what we're seeing here when we're working with the data as well, we're starting to see that we've got this spread. We've got highly collaborative people, we've got highly individual people. And when we're starting to ask people whether they move around and use different spaces, they're not so much, not really where we would want them to be. So what we've got is these really collaborative people and these really individual people all trying to work together from the same location. And what we've got then is a perfect storm, really, of people just doing completely different things and all kind of like staying together, usually towards those team home zones, those workstation kind of based settings. And this is where Rachel's team can really make that difference, educating, supporting, guiding people so that they understand the best spaces to use different things. And what we found in Stevenson Street, which we were just chatting about, is we've got far more people there who are moving around and using different spaces. And actually what we found is those people who are moving around are having a much better experience than people who are staying put by around 10%. So those people who are moving around using the right space, the right activity, their workplace experience is going through the roof.
Oh, wow.
So it just goes to show that importance, that framework that Rachel's talking about, educating, supporting people, guiding them, informing them, how important it is. And then that bit at the end where you're assessing, are people moving around? Are they using the right locations for the right task? So yes, lots of key things, I think, coming out in the data, Sarah.
Absolutely. And that's really fascinating on kind of the bottom half of that slide, Leah, that it talks about those 10 most important activities and kind of where they can be completed from. And I suppose give us a shout out in the chat if you feel like you identify with that or that's sort of a bit different, because that really brings to life that the civil service is ultimately, we have to do our job through collaboration. And if we don't have the right spaces to encourage that and be that magnet, then our buildings aren't helping us be productive and efficient. And so it just helps really, for me, tell the story in how important that framework and then the data and then the revisiting it and sort of that constant revision. Rachel, you referred to one of the steps of the framework being all over it. It feels like it's a living and breathing thing. And certainly for me, who's been in the civil service a while, looking at our workspaces through this lens feels really innovative and really modern as well. So it tells lots of good stories about how the civil service is investing in its workspaces and the experience that we as individuals are having in them as well. So absolutely fascinating. Now I'm going to open up to the audience for their questions, and there's a couple of questions coming in through the chat, I suppose. But if I can just monopolise my role as host, and ask Rachel and Leah a question first. So Rachel, you talked about kind of change management being apparent through that whole workplace experience framework. And Leah talked about, you know, if people aren't using the spaces in the right way for the right tasks, then we're going to come up against some of that kind of friction. So Rachel, how do we make that change happen? Your framework gives us a good idea of what's needed when, but give us some real life examples of how some of those behaviours have been changed.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, at the end of the day with our framework, the actual organisational change and that smarter working change it sits with the organisation itself, it sits with the department. So it really is about us trying to plug in to the right people who can help drive that and support that. And, you know, we're there to help point them in the right direction and keep that momentum going. and what's really key as well is once the project is finished and people are in the building as well, is actually making sure that the on-site team, and for example at 23 Stevenson Street, we have a sort of community manager who lives and breathes the ethos of the building, and works on a day-to-day basis with the departments and the individual customers in the building to help remind them of the etiquettes, the behaviours, how the spaces are meant to be used. So sending out products that we've developed around space types and how to use them, having those conversations in the community group and with the customer user group as well. So it doesn't stop really. It's like a continuous cycle.
Absolutely. And Leah, one more question from me, and then I'll go to what we've got coming through on the chat. So you kind of brought Stevenson Street out, the 23 Stevenson Street hub in Birmingham out as a really great example. And as someone who has worked from there, I'm really interested in your experience of it. Does it feel like that in real life? So what is it like to work from that environment where it's one of the best environments over that Leesman kind of benchmark?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the variety of spaces. It comes down to the variety of spaces, that choice and the empowerment. So I think those are the things that are really key in making a difference to me. I suppose I'm educated and informed because Rachel's team did those brilliant tours of Stevenson Street. So first of all, I've got that education and information and guidance about the different spaces, understanding, where I can work, when I can work there, why I would want to work there. And I think it's thinking about why and when would I want to use those different spaces. Mm-hmm. And it's trying new things as well. So I was in the building earlier this week, and we were chatting with some of our commercial partners as well. Now, traditionally, you'd just think, well, we're going to do that in a meeting room. But we didn't. There's so many brilliant spaces in Stevenson Street that we were like, well, why? I just thought, why do we need a meeting room? We've got fantastic collaborative spaces. We're not talking about anything that's commercially sensitive. So we can just go and use one of those collaborative spaces, get round a collaborative desk with a screen at the end, have a natter. And it's just that bit more informal. It just feels a bit less stuffy than the meeting room. So for me, it's the variety of spaces, it's the being empowered to go and work anywhere, and it's the community as well. Mm-hmm. It's such a friendly, welcoming place. As soon as you walk into the building, the security staff, reception, everyone's so friendly and approachable. And you just feel that warmth there, really. It's got such fantastic variety of spaces. Am I gushing?
Absolutely, but we love it, Leah. And there's Charlotte's come through on the chat and said there are things like the kitchen areas and stuff like that is making a real difference to staff. So we're not just tooting our own horn in this about it. It is being given that recognition from Leesman for a reason. So it's really great for some of us who might not have that choice or area or workspaces available to us. It's great to see what can be achieved, even though that might not be available to us at the moment. So let's head over to some of your questions then. We'll start with one from Helen first. So she said, our estates team are partway through refurbing 2 additional units for them. They're the single occupant in them. Are the team happy or able to get involved partway through a project? Who wants to take that one?
Shall I pick that one up?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, applying the framework, like I said in sort of my spiel earlier, is that it can be adapted. And I'll be perfectly honest, we're really only just coming into the phases now with some of our projects where we're actually right in at the beginning. We've often been helicoptered in quite late into the day because we're, as a team, we've not been around that long. So yes, you can come in sort of later in the day and still use different elements of the framework to apply to sort of existing projects, and you can apply it to a new build or a refurb. It's adaptable for any. So happy to share any of our learning if you want, and have that conversation to sort of see how the framework could work for you.
Absolutely. And I think just bringing that experience to life, Rachel, about how just kind of recently we're being started to be able to do the framework from the start, gives us an idea of how that lived in experience has really evolved through the framework. So we had this, you know, the dream state of how it would be, but the framework in real life isn't always applied in that way, as real life just works out, doesn't it? So that, I think some of those nuances and challenges is really helpful for us and our audience to understand that just because the framework says it's this step and then this step and then this step, we might come in at step 5 or 6 and have to backtrack and be on the back foot.
They run concurrently depending on you know, what the requirements are for the project or for the departments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, so going to mention on that as well. In terms of gathering insights as well, I would say when I talk through all those things, you can use the pre-occupancy data for. If you get in there early, you can still do it at this stage and still get a lot of data from it. So it's still going to act as your baseline for your benefit realization. It'll still help you understand how smarter working mature the teams are, how much education and support. So you might be too late to inform the spaces, but it might give you a steer in terms of whether we're on the right track with the spaces we're creating, or do we think we might need to make some tweaks afterwards. So I'd say it still can inform those things. You might not get as much value as you would have if you did it, you know, right at the start. But I think there's still value in the data, I would say.
Yeah, spot on. Well, you would say that, wouldn't you, Leah? But absolutely, that, yeah, there's always value in that data bit. So let's move on to a question from Charlotte. So she is in a department who are currently working in a building that's just started refurb to turn it into, I'm guessing that's one of our government hubs, Charlotte, without location, cannot confirm. So as part of her comms, she would love to do more to get staff excited about the feeling of belonging. So those community bits that Leah and Rachel were touching on that really make a difference to people. But Charlotte struggled to find GPA hub branding, to, you know, pictures and logos and all of that jazz. So is there something out there that we could help Charlotte with?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So Charlotte, depending on which project it is or which building it is, then there should be somebody attached to that project who will help you be able to get that stuff, will be able to supply some of that information. So do reach out back to the project. And they should be able to provide you with some of the stuff, and also links to any community work that might be just starting off on that particular project, which will be a great source for all this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And if it's having that workplace experience framework applied to it, then, you know, like Rachel said, her team are going to be all over some of those bits. So what I will do is pop our multi-user email in at the bottom of the chat for you guys. So if your question isn't answered, or you want to do some of that follow up with the team, then you can get in touch with us and we'll point you in the right direction. Brilliant. So let's move on to some other of our other questions. We're going to close up at 1:45, so hopefully we'll get to cover all of the stuff that you are asking. And another one from Charlotte, which is brilliant. We don't ever apologise for asking a question because we love it. We're curious bunnies ourselves, so keep them coming in. What is the life cycle for the framework? So, for example, once a building becomes a hub, when would we expect to repeat all of this and see it meeting people's needs? You know, when would we expect to do any refresh, considering what that post-occupancy data is telling us? Rachel, again, might be best for you, and Leah maybe come in on the data part.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting one, this one, because it was, you know, obviously this was born out of the need to support government hub projects, but actually we're really starting to think about how we actually apply this in BAU as well. And it's almost like that continuation of that very last stage. It doesn't ever really stop, you know, and then it loops back round to the front again. Yeah. So post-occupancy evaluation after a project typically tends to happen, as Leah said, sort of 12 to 18 months afterwards, but, you know, that can happen on 2 or 3 years after. And then there's ongoing insights work into the experience as well, which then, you know, leads into sort of action planning, improvement, and, you know, again, which is supported by the customer experience team. But I'm gonna segue to Leah on that one.
Nice.
Customer satisfaction work.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of once the building's handed over into live, so we chatted about the pre-occupancy, the post-occupancy. So the building then is live. So the intention is that, or the intention we have within GPA is that we would then resurvey that building every 12 to 18 months. We want to make sure that it's, so say for Birmingham Street, is it still meeting those brilliant workplace experiences that we're seeing so far? And we've got buildings on across the spectrum, really. But the intention is for every building, we'd survey it every 12 to 18 months, improvement plans where it is needed. And then we may resurvey on something specific. So say we find there's an issue, perhaps in terms of like communal areas or with the canteen or something like that, that we could target those areas. Now, whether that's a full survey, whether that's a shorter pulse survey, just targeting those things. We're also going to start using those happy or not terminals. So whether it's problems, perhaps say, for example, like in meeting rooms with AV equipment, can we make, whether it's, I don't know, whatever area it is, we can put those terminals in and gather more insights and more data. So yes, very much so. It doesn't start and end with that framework, that insights gathering, analysing the data, understanding what it is that we can do to improve. Do we need to dive a bit deeper? Do we need to have focus groups to understand what's going on? Do we need to have observations? Do we need the happy or not terminals? There's all sorts of things that we can do then. So yeah, definitely doesn't end with that life cycle. It goes on for the life cycle of the building.
Absolutely. So Rachel and Leah are never allowed to leave the business or retire. They've got to stay here to keep that activity driving on. Quite right. So let's move on to quite a specific one from Dave. Now, Dave, you're a friend of the family, so I don't mind putting this to probably Rachel. How do we know how the Manchester hub is progressing? Any updates on that?
Right. Yeah, good question. Progressing well.
Yeah.
I know it has actually did the Leesman survey back in November. Is that correct, Leah? So I think there's work taking place at the moment just to look at the results of that and the findings that are coming out of that, which will then obviously feed into the design and how we support the project going forward. So yeah, still it's a project, I think, that we're still kind of in those early discovery, challenge, gather and baseline stages at the moment. So starting to think about where are we going next with the data, with the support.
Absolutely. And then we'll finish up with one from Deppy and then the one from Helen. So we'll start with the Deppy one first, then Leah, and this will be one for you. So I guess, Deppy, you're looking for kind of that overview of Leesman stats that Leah shared earlier about, what spaces that are most important to do our tasks in. Can you just give us a review of that slide, Leah, if you can?
Did you want me to represent? Sorry.
If you're able to, yeah. Don't want to put the pressure on with the tech because we all know what that's like.
We'll give it a go.
Yeah. That's
so is it this slide?
Yeah.
And is there anything in particular you want to recap, or is it just having a look at that data again? Do we just leave it up?
Yeah, let's just go over some of the key messages you talked us through previously, if you can, Leah.
Yeah, so this is data from across the entire of the civil service. We are seeing that there are more collaborative people than there are individual, but it's really important to do that department by department because we have seen other departments that swings the other way. So it's really important to get those spaces right. We also start to have a look at the ideal locations to complete the top 10 most important activities. 6 of those should be in the collaboration zone, 2 in the team home zone, 1 in meeting room and 1 in do not disturb.
Brilliant. And sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your flow there. Deppy's just come back to confirm it was the blue dot slide. So the 23 Stevenson Street comparison bit.
Okay. Now I've got to try and work out how to go backwards, but
look.
There we are.
Yeah, made it. Well done.
Was there anything in particular? It's the blue dots. Okay, so the one with the blue dots, they are mean that they're above Leesman plus. So Leesman, when we do the Leesman survey, we can compare our data to the Leesman benchmark, which is the Leesman average. If it's a red dot, it's below the Leesman average. If it's a green dot, it's above the Leesman average. If it's a blue dot, it's above Leesman plus. So it's even better again. So it's better than the best of the best. So that's where we're kind of like pitching ourselves now.
Brilliant.
Hopefully that answers it, but please pop something in the chat if it doesn't.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Leah. So we're getting close to having to close up the session. And just as a reminder, we will get these slides out to you. So don't worry about having to squint and read exactly what the words say. We'll get them so you can pore over those figures, because if you're anything like me wanting to see some of those percentages, you can pore over that with a cup of tea later. So one more question was about, do we have any outside collaboration spaces? Rachel?
Oh, I don't, to be honest, it really depends on the building,
Mm.
you know, and what space is available sort of to be able to do that. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Mm. Yeah.
Really, really would be wonderful if we had the opportunity to do that, but it really will depend on the building itself. Just reflecting back though, one of the buildings we have recently opened at Key House in Peterborough. A lot of our DEFRA colleagues are based in there, and there's a lovely public realm space on the outside where they've got some, you know, lovely sort of planting and you know, really in keeping with you know, sort of their ethos and what they do as a department as well. I think it's even got some beehives actually on the roof. So yeah. So you know, really, it's important that you know, the spaces and our hubs actually really connect with the public realm, and they do you know, really sort of have that sense of place within the communities that they're located. So, but if we could have outside collaborative space, that would be amazing. We'll have a word with design and see if we can get it worked into the design guide.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a note to finish on in kind of looking at that, you know, what are we looking for in the spaces and how can we make them even better? So I've just popped a link to our multi-user. If you want to follow up or you've got another question that you want to pose to Leah and Rachel, please get your questions into that link. And just a final massive thank you to Leah and Rachel for sharing your experience, knowledge and insight. It's been incredible to kind of see the overview that you've presented of the framework. And thank you all for tuning in and listening to us as well. Hopefully it's been just as insightful for you guys as well. So I'd like to now bring the live lounge to a close and just say thank you. Don't forget to join us at 12 o'clock for our hackathon, and then we've got some panels after that later in the afternoon. Rachel, Leah, a final thank you. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.